I want to tell you a story. We had a pastor who came to a particular neighborhood to start a church among Shiite Muslims. He knew very clearly that the Lord said, go to this neighborhood and take your family and start a church. He went, and a few days after he arrived, the doorbell rang, and he went out to the gate to open the door, and 3 masked men put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger and murdered him that day. Not long after, God spoke to another man of God, a pastor, and said, I want you to go and take his place. I want you to take your family and go to that same place, that same neighborhood, and I want you to plant my church among the Shiite Muslims there. That Christ follower willingly obeyed the Lord's instruction, took his family and moved into the same flat where that pastor had been. Not long after he moved in, there was a ring at the doorbell, the gate outside. He went out to the gate, and 3 men, masked, put a mask over his head and threw him into the back of a car. He said that he rode for a long time in the trunk of that vehicle, not knowing where he was going. But he said the vehicle came to a stop, and they lifted the lid and pulled him out of the car. And he said he was still masked, and they walked him some steps to a building. He said he went up some steps, heard a door open, stepped inside, and the masked men took this hood off the pastor, and he looked around the room. It was a giant room with 900 men sitting around the room. 900 Shiite Muslim men. The pastor said at that point he thought, oh my, they're going to do a public execution for me. And at that point, the masked man that had kidnapped the pastor, he looked at him and he said, sir, we did not mean to frighten you, but do you remember the man that lived in that home before you did? And of course the pastor said, yes, I do. And then the man said, well, I'm the one that pulled the trigger. The 3 of us are the ones that murdered him. And the night that we killed him, do you see these men in this room? Pastor said, yes. He said, the night that we killed that man, every single one of us in this room had the same dream. We dreamt that the blood of that man was on our hands, but that God in his mercy would send someone in his place who could tell us how we get the blood off our hands. Are you that man? And that night, that pastor had the blessed opportunity to share the gospel with 900 Shiite Muslim men who'd had the same dream the same night. And that night, we're told that all 900 of those men chose to follow Jesus, the Messiah. And we heard later that their entire families, their wives and children, came to know Christ and follow him as well. So I say to you again, is it worth it to ask without ceasing? Is it worth it to be intentional with what we ask God to do? Do we have faith as tiny as a mustard seed so that we can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move? I encourage you in this hour in history, let's not grow weary in doing good. Let's not grow weary in asking God to do great things among the nations. Let's ask him to do things that are beyond what any human being or any government leader or any militia leader could ever do. And let's ask God to continue to be the desire of the nations and to bring more and more Shiite Muslims, Sunni Muslims, ISIS members, you name it. May we trust our mighty God to raise up more and more Christ followers who will ask him for the nations together and intentionally. God bless you.